Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and in this channel we look at microfiche from long ago, different old articles from newspapers that are all in the public domain, so it is fine to read the entire article. And for today's microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Gentleman's Magazine, or also known as the London Magazine, and this one is from May 1768. And is entitled Expulsion of the 6 Students at Oxford. I am very curious as to what these students did to cause their expulsion. Since the times were so different then as they are now, I suspect that it is something that we would not consider terribly terrible, but I don't know, maybe it was, so let's find out. Mr. Urban. Okay, just a few very quick notes about this newspaper itself. It is written or edited probably by a man named Severus Urban. I do not think that was his real name. So most of the articles are addressed to him. Also, there was a letter that looks like an F but was actually an S back then, just to let you know. Don't get confused. I do sometimes. Alright. Mr. Urban, Oxford, May 26. Some injurious misrepresentations of the late proceedings at St. something Hall, I'm guessing. By the way, I found out this is not redaction, this is more a shorthand, although it's very difficult to read if you don't know exactly what they're saying. Having appeared in the public papers, it is hoped the following impartial account will be published in justice to the university. Okay, so they're defending the university's decision to expel these 6 students. Alright. I'm guessing the next sentence, it says the vice president? Yeah? Vice president of the hall? I'm assuming. The vice president of the hall having brought a complaint to the VC? Vice chancellor? Chancellor? Something like that? As visitor of the hall by office, that several improper persons had been admitted there of late, whose principles and conduct gave just grounds of offense. The vice-chancellor, I'm just guessing here. Okay, if you know different and know what they're trying to refer to, please write it in the comments below, because I'm only guessing. Vice-chancellor, whose prudence, moderation, and candor are above all praise, consulted with the heads of the houses at a full meeting, and was unanimously advised to take cognizance of the affair, which appeared of a very alarming and dangerous nature. Ooh, dangerous. Ooh, scandalous. A public visitation was accordingly held by the vice-chancellor, assisted, at his request, by 3 heads of houses and the senior proctor as his assessors. When after a fair and open examination the charge which was delivered in upon oath was proved by evidence, and by the confession of the parties against 6 members of the said hall, who were expelled in conformity to the statutes, with the unanimous concurrence of all the assessors and the entire approbation of the university in general. Ooh, it was unanimous. It was a unanimous decision to expel these individuals. So maybe they did deserve it. Okay. And first it was proved that all these persons had either held or frequented illicit conventicles, where some of them, though not in orders, had preached, expounded, and prayed extempore, and where these offices of religion were usually performed by others of the lowest station and abilities, and particularly that they often met at a conventicle held at a private house within the university, where one Hewitt, a staymaker, and lately a common soldier, and a woman, the mistress of the house, officiated and taught. Okay, so it sounds to me like they were teaching religion without a license. Okay, yeah, I could see how that could be a problem. I didn't know they needed a license at that point, but apparently they did. I guess that makes sense. You know, you don't want just any random person preaching at your church. But it sounds more like a church thing than it does a school thing, so I'm not sure why the school was involved. Although I do know that people who became preachers had to study at least for a short time, so maybe they were studying to become preachers? I'm not sure. Secondly, that some of them had been bred up to, and exercised the lowest trades and occupations. Oh, scandalous. That one had been a weaver. Oh my gosh, a weaver of all things. What a stupid reason to expel somebody. And kept a tap house. Oh no. Another a barber. Oh dear. And third a draper. Don't you dare make those curtains. And were all wholly illiterate and incapable of performing the statutable exercises of the university. That's one point. If they were illiterate, then I doubt that they were able to study, because why would you go to a university if you couldn't read? That doesn't make much sense now, does it? So, okay, that makes sense. So if they are not performing up to that point. However, just being classist and saying, how dare you be a weaver, is a little silly. If you're a weaver, that doesn't mean that you can't study. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean you're illiterate. It doesn't mean you're uneducated. By the way, those are all completely independent of each other. I am not calling anyone stupid. So, in fact, I'm saying that they're not. They might not be. They might not be. I don't know them personally, so. But if they're saying that they are not able to keep up with the work and maintain their classes and get good grades, then that's a different story. Okay, so if their grades are not to the point that they need to be, then that's justifiable. I mean, you can flunk out of a college, and anybody can. And much more incapable of being qualified for holy orders for which they were designed, and into which some of them had endeavored to intrude, being maintained for that purpose at the charge of persons suspected of enthusiasm. Suspected of enthusiasm, huh? You just say they're enthusiastic? I'm just saying. So all of them wanted to be preachers of some church. I'm guessing Church of England. That would make sense. Thirdly, that these persons were attached to the sect called Methodists. Oh no. Well, at the same time, if you're a Methodist, I don't think you should be preaching for the Church of England. I'm just saying. It's not really terribly efficient. You should be preaching at your own church, yeah? And held their doctrines, viz., that faith without works is sufficient for salvation, and that there is no necessity of good works, that the immediate impulse of the Spirit is to be waited for, that once a child of God and always a child of God, and the like. And that some of them had endeavored to instill these doctrines into others, whom they encouraged to neglect the advice and authority of their parents and friends in adherence to these opinions. So not only are they Methodists, what a horrible thing to be, just kidding, Methodists are fine, but the doctrinal differences between the Methodists and the Church of England were enough to bother them. However, it was more than that. They were also preaching these doctrines to other people. And I love how they encourage them to neglect the advice and authority of their parents and friends. Yeah, because, having your own opinion doesn't matter at all. Apparently that's a terrible thing to do. I found it interesting that that is an official charge. You believe in different things and you're preaching them, and therefore you can't be here. But at the same time, if this is a university that is only they were studying to be priests, so why in the world would you study to be a priest of the Church of England if you were actually Methodist? Was it only for the money, But even if it was, and they obviously feel strongly about their beliefs to the point that they are not rescinding them, so why would you try to be a priest of the Church of England? You know what I mean? Why would you do that? I personally wouldn't, but however, at the same time, is that a reason to expel them? So, can you study to be a priest of one church while still being a member of another? I kind of don't think you should be able to, but I'm not sure if that's an actual rule. But clearly it was at this point. All right. Fourthly, it appeared also in the course of the examination that one of these persons, some time before his entrance into the university, had presumed to officiate as a clergyman in a chapel belonging to a parish church, and had, in defiance of his father's authority and admonitions, connected himself with Methodists, and had been discarded by his father for such disobedience, which circumstances were indeed taken notice of in the sentence of expulsion, but not made the ground of it, as it had been falsely asserted. Alright, so this person, whoever it was, had preached at another church, even though he had already become a Methodist. And so they're saying that, and it was in defiance of his father, and since, he wasn't following the advice of his father, the people were saying that that was the reason why they were being expelled, because he wasn't doing what his father wanted, but that's not actually the reason, is what they're saying. Okay, yeah, I can kind of see it. I mean, if this is a university that is connected to the church, then I can see that, yeah. Fifthly, it was also proved that some of these persons had behaved very irreverently and disrespectfully to their tutor, and instead of disposing themselves to profit by his instructions, had industriously fought to cavil with and vex him. Okay, yeah, harassing somebody is also not okay. That makes sense. But at the same time, I can see why they did. I mean, if you are Methodist and you're sitting in front of the people of the Church of England, yeah, it's going to annoy you to the point that you might tease somebody at some point. There is a contradiction here, however, and I'll point it out in a moment. Let's finish reading the article first. It is now submitted to the public whether those whose office it is to attend to the education of youth in this place, and to prevent their receiving wrong impressions in so essential a point as religion, have not acted consistently with their duty in making use of the authority vested in them by the statutes to remove such obnoxious persons, and to stop the growth of enthusiasm and extirpate, as far as in them lies, principles subversive of all true religion and morality. Well, that's splitting hairs now, isn't it? So what you're saying is that they're from the wrong church, so therefore they shouldn't be there? Is that really a rule? Is that religious discrimination? Gotta think about it, gotta look to inside, gotta ask yourself. Subversive of all true religion and morality. Okay, they didn't say anything about morality. They didn't say that they were going off, sleeping with all of other people and, trying to seduce people or like trying to cheat people or any of those things. They were simply preaching religion that they didn't agree with. So, still a contradiction. I'm going to come back to it. What the motives were which induced the, what was it again? P of the H, something of the Hall, to admit such persons upon recommendations highly suspicious is left to his own breast? Okay. I can read, I promise. Is left to his own breast to determine. The sober-minded part of mankind will scarcely think that his conduct can escape some sort of censure, much less deserve the encomiums that have been lavished upon it. I am yours, sir, yours, etc. So it is not signed. The contradiction, I'm going to skip that last part because they're just saying, how dare somebody have even let them in? Yeah, okay, they should have screened a little better maybe. They should have asked, are you really a member of the Church of England? Because instead of just asking if you've been baptized, because clearly these people who probably were baptized in the Church of England have since converted to Methodist faith. So this seems to be more of a question of, do you belong to the right church? So the question that I am asking is this religious discrimination, or are these reasonable requirements? I will point out one thing. They're saying that these people have chosen to ignore their tutor, they're teasing him, they're not being kind, but they're still studying, and yet they called them illiterate beforehand. So did they call them illiterate because they really couldn't read properly and they weren't very educated, or did they call them illiterate because they didn't have the same belief system and that was the discriminatory slur, calling them illiterate as like, you're just stupid, calling them stupid and be like, how dare you come and try and study at this university? Because to be honest, the way they talk about them after that point of talking about them as being of low class makes me think that they weren't illiterate, really. they were literate, they did know the Bible, they knew what they were talking about. It was just a matter of religious difference of religious opinions. Once again, at the same time, I'm asking myself, would you go to study to become a priest of a church that you didn't believe in? Or did they just do it in order to bother people? Or were they already accepted in and then they became converted and now they're trying to convert others? I'm very confused as to that, because this particular article is so very full of discriminatory statements and really not kind things that they were saying about them, that I can't actually believe the factualness of what they're saying. Is this really factual? Is this really what happened? Because I don't think it is. Not with the way that they're contradicting themselves, which makes me go back to some of the earlier statements, particularly their second point. Secondly, that some of them had been bred up to and exercised the lowest trades and occupations. I suspect they have lots of people at that school that had worked in trade, or else they wouldn't have been able to get in. Okay? That one had been a weaver and kept a tap house, another a barber, and a third a draper, and were all wholly illiterate and incapable of performing the statutable exercises of the university, and much more incapable of being qualified for holy orders for which they were designed, and into which some of them had endeavored to intrude, being maintained for that purpose at the charge of persons suspected of enthusiasm. I'm going to put that in air quotes for you. Enthusiasm. But if you look at this paragraph, taking into account the other paragraphs they mentioned, makes me think, number one, that they were only pointing out their merchant connections as a symbol of classicism, which they clearly have. And number two is that the rest of it is more of being a slur against these people than it is facts. They were all wholly illiterate and incapable of performing the statutable exercises of the university. If they were incapable, then they wouldn't be passing their classes. So the question is, were they passing their classes or not? If they were, they clearly are not illiterate. And if they weren't only because of religion, then that's blatant discrimination. So this article, to be perfectly honest, sounds extremely discriminatory against people who have a faith that is not what they were expecting. Once again, I will go back and say this would be justified if this is a school that requires you to be of a certain religion. And once again, why would you want to become a priest of a religion that you don't believe in? So I can see why they were expelled. So on the one hand, I can understand it. On the other, there is some blatant discrimination going on here, and I feel a little bad for those young men who were studying. I'm assuming they were young, since most students are young. And that it's quite sad to me that they were expelled. Not that they were expelled, but that they were treated so badly. Because they were clearly treated badly, or else they wouldn't have been singled out the way they were. Were they completely guiltless? Probably not. Most people who are punished deserve something. Whether or not they deserved what they got is different, is another story. And I would ask myself also whether or not this article was really necessary. I feel like this is part of their discrimination. So to anybody who is discriminated against, and that's what causes them to lose their place in some sort of anything, university, school, job, whatever it may be, you have my sympathy, and just know that you are clearly not alone. So that is our Microfiche time capsule for today. Please join us next time for another Microfiche time capsule. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.